also can record this if you want to do that.
Okay, I've just started the recording then. I
Good.
appreciate that.
Yeah, and let me know where it is. I'd like to have a
Okay, all
spot.
right, it's a running. The
Okay.
I, I'm not going to do very much of an introduction, Bob, other than to tell you
Oh,
that
there's enough
you're
here.
you're quite the guy, and we're glad to have you here. And I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Well, thank you. Where are you guys, by the way?
Okay, so we're located in a little town about 40 miles west of Salt Lake on your direct headed towards Reno,
Mm-hmm.
Nevada. We're up in the high desert, and that's why the name of our club, the West Desert Amateur Radio Club.
Gotcha.
The
All right.
And it's
Well,
a town called Tooele, spelled
Tooele.
Tooele. You would never get the pronunciation from the way the name of the town is spelled.
Well, I
Okay.
appreciate the invite very much. So glad to be here. I love coming to club meetings and teaching some of the things that I've learned through the years, sharing some of the science. That's what it's all about because there's so much here. We don't get a lot of it today. I don't know why. The textbooks and handbooks, you got to be a third degree engineer to read them. But we'll get into that. One last question before I hit the button here. How much time do I have?
We schedule this for an hour or whatever.
'Cause some of these go much longer. It depends on the Q and A's and all that, but
Yeah.
good section will be about 80, 90 minutes if you want to do the whole thing. I can cut
Oh,
it in
do it.
half.
I think I don't think anybody's going to complain. Go for it.
Okay, away we go. Thank you so very much. Well, I'm in Belleville, Illinois. This is where my new studio is. We're just across the river from the Mississippi River from St. Louis. Uh, the downtown Great Arch is only about 15 miles west of us. Well, I want to get started tonight and let you guys know, first of all, a little bit about where I came from and why I am here and what I've learned from ham radio. I started early in 1950. I was an accordion player for a while, but then my wonderful parents bought me a Hammond B3 in 52. That was a big deal because they were not wealthy people, but they did it. And I started teaching myself by listening to George Wright and Jesse Crawford and all those great record albums. And I ended up getting a job at the age of 14 in a restaurant, playing on the weekends and making quite a bit of money in those days. It was kind of crazy. But 2 years later, in 1956, I became the organist at the Fox Theater in St. Louis. Now, why I tell you all of this, it's very important. It's how I learned to listen. And that's something that always kind of grites on me that not everybody can listen. They hear, but they don't listen to the harmonics and things. And we're going to do some of that tonight. Have a lot of demos of that kind of thing. You see those pipes there. When Stan Can, who was the organist, hired me, he didn't he needed a substitute, but there was one other thing. He needed somebody to help him to voice and tune about 4,000 pipes from 1 inch up to 32 foot. And that's how I learned to listen. A harmonic value. So you see those brass trumpets, the one beside the other, they all had to sound the same. One couldn't be mellow, one couldn't be bright, and so on. That is where I learned to listen. But in 1956, I became a ham radio operator. One of my high school chums had gotten his license. Now, that'd be kind of fun. And my parents took me to Walter Ash in St. Louis and that Harvey Wells and that SX99 and that it's an RME VHF converter. They got me on the air and it really became my college education. That Harvey Wells is still with me. It's right over there in the other rack. It's on the air every morning on AM after all these years, same tubes and all. But I learned so much from that little booger and a lot of things about ham radio in general. But all of a sudden, about 2 weeks into my uh, coming on the air. Wow, I heard this crazy signal. I'm going, what is that? Distorted. It was horrible. Next night, I come back on the SX99. I heard that same thing. So I got real, real gutsy and I called him and he came back because I could understand him. I had pushed the BFO button on this SX99. He was on single sideband on 6 meters. That wasn't heard of. Single sideband was hardly doing anything down on the lower frequencies. But he came back and it was K0DGE. And every night I would meet with him, and he was just putting this single sideband station on the air. Come to find out later, he was one of the very few in the country on sideband on 6 meters. So I had told him that I came into St. Louis several times a week to play at the Fox, and we'd play 8 minutes, and then we had time to kill while the movie was going on. He said, "You come and visit me." He gave me his address, and I pulled up in front of the building, and it was KMOX radio. Larry Burroughs was the chief engineer at KMOX. And I was just mesmerized. And I asked him, would you build me one of those? No, I can't do that. But I'll teach you how. And he did. So it all started right there. We put together a Central Electronics 10B. That was the first commercially available sideband transmitter. It had plug-in coils for the different frequencies. Well, Larry taught me how to take that coil out and wind it for 6 meters using a grid dip meter. So I learned how to do that. You wrap a coil of wire, put it next to the other coil of the grid dip. And when that meter dipped down, bingo, that was the frequency of that coil. Well, this really got me going. But now we had a 20 meter, 14 megacycle transmitter. How do we get it up to 50? He taught me how to build a 6U8 oscillator. We took that, made the 36 meg came out, plugged into the crystal socket. What do you got with 14 and 36? 50 megs. I was on 6 meter sideband. The station grew really, really fast. And there weren't very many people at all on 6 meters. We found out later that I was one of 10 at that time. And it was fascinating. And I was an antenna freak. I had these loving parents. They allowed me to put up a 110-foot Roan. That's a 36-foot long Telerex spiral array. Very interesting antenna. But what above it was a pair of J beams for 2 meters. These are beams that were made in the UK, and they were very, very good. And they were up over 110 foot. But this spiral array was interesting. It wasn't horizontal and it wasn't vertical. They were spiraled like that. And they were thinking it would help some of the QSB problems, some of the the signals. They'll fade away, and you don't know why. You figure, oh, they lost their power. No, what's happening is that when signals leave your antenna in a horizontal position, they might rotate 3 or 4 times before they get to you, and they might be all the way vertical, halfway vertical. And that's what causes a lot of fading on signals. They're changing polarities. And that was a very interesting antenna. And I enjoyed all of these antenna things. But I built a 6 and 2 Thunderbolt. Give me a kilowatt and a half on 6 R2 meters. Up above my head is the Central Electronics, and I had built a transverter that we could get on 6 R2 meters to drive the Thunderbolt. And I was with that 110-foot array. It was a big signal on the air, and we were having a lot of fun. One day I get a call. It was from Bob Drake of the Drake Company that built all the great Drake equipment. He said, "Hey, are you the guy that's got that kilowatt on single sideband on 6 meters. And I said, yes, sir. I told him that it was Larry Burroughs to help me build it and all that. He said, well, we would like to invite you to one of our meetings. We have annual meetings at the Biltmore Hotel, and we'd like for you to come and tell everybody how you did this. So off we went. One of my friends, my ham radio buddies there near a hometown of Marissa, Illinois, he had an airplane. So we got in his Bonanza and flew out to the Biltmore. They had taken all of the furniture out of one of the floors and moved in the Collins room, the Hallicrafter room, the Drake room, the Central Electronics room. But all these people were there. Wes Shum from Central Electronics, Bill Halligan, Bob Drake, Carl Mosley. It's like, wow. And I give my paper, of course, and so on. What this annual meeting was the beginning of the Dayton Hamvention. It started out once a year doing these technical papers at the Biltmore. In 1964, they moved out to Hare Arena and became a lot more. But I was fascinated. I just a young kid and gave them what I knew about it. And sorry that Larry couldn't have been with me. While I was there, a guy came to me and said, we'd like to see if you could do an experiment for us. And I probably could. So they sent over their antenna, and their antenna was 128 elements J-beam. This was an amazing antenna. And again, my loving parents allowed me to do whatever. But I was making a lot of money as a kid. I barely made it through high school because I was too busy playing the organ professionally. I had another lot right beside our house was an empty lot, and that's what we did here. It was a 50-foot roan. And a friend of mine, K9SGD, who lived a few miles down the road, he was the Motorola dealer. And he knew a lot about all this that I didn't. And he helped build all the phasing lines and put it together. And another friend, K9EBA, he was a contractor and he had cranes and lifts and all that. Away we went. It was magnificent. The station grew fast. You'll see in the bottom left there is SB62. Discovered that that was the first band switching transverter. In those days, the transmitters were on like 14 megacycles, 20 meters. You feed it into the transverter and you come out with 6 or 2 meters. And I built that, of course, for myself, not knowing what was all in front of me. CQ Magazine hired me to write a column every month on VHF sideband, specifically VHF sideband. It was that rare. And I was just really, really thrilled because that was a place where all the serious VHFers showed up and we were to experiment and do things. I wrote for a VHF Amateur. In fact, that's another one of my transverters. That wasn't a band switching one. And we had the whole article, how to build it and all that. This was all just wonderful, fun stuff for a young kid. Then Joe Hall, the Motorola dealer, said, you need to put that on the market. I said, I just don't have time because I was playing every night and all that. So he said, I'll do it. So he did. He founded a company called Hallert, and I built the gear. We had a 6-meter, and then we had a 2-meter transverter and a 5894 100-watt final. We were also doing moon bounce with that big array and didn't know much about it, but talking to a guy down in Oklahoma. We'll come back and visit him in a little bit on moon bounce. It was, again, fascinating for this young guy. And it was my college professor. I learned so much from building stuff and making things happen. But then I got a job at the Holiday Inn in St. Louis out near the airport. And this is the largest Holiday Inn in the chain in 1959. And it was 600 rooms on one floor. And it had a 4-star restaurant, a 4-star German restaurant. And I built a pipe organ for that restaurant, all the pipes were behind glass, and we would have people come from all over the country, busloads of organ fans and people that come and have a nice dinner and enjoy something. It was very unique. But I got tired of all of that. I had 12 years playing every night. So I started a music shop in my hometown of Marissa, Illinois, 50 miles southeast of St. Louis. And my dad and mom had a clothing store, men's shoe store. You see, that's my dad down there in the white shirt. He stuck his head out the door when I was taking that picture. But it really did become the rock and roll capital of the country. I didn't know what was in front of me. I started out with the store selling Hammond organs. I had a Hammond organ franchise. I knew Hammond organs upside down, backwards, and forwards. I would cut them in half. A lot of the groups that were traveling in those days, these things were heavy. They were 300 pounds, and I could make it a lot lighter. I built 3 manual ones, all kinds of stuff. But the bands around the area, the St. Louis area, they found out about this guy that had a soldering iron and I could fix things. And it really took off like crazy then. Because I would rent Hammond organs to some of the arenas and the big concert halls, and boy, the PAs were terrible. And I built these PAs, bigger ones, and that I didn't know, but no one had done this yet. Those big speakers the guys are standing on, those were from the Fox Theater. A few years prior, they were giving them away to me because they were putting a new sound system in, and I took those, and away we went. And it really, really took feet because all these guys and gals managers were after me because no one had had any PAs like that. Dolly Parton and Jerry Lee Lewis, and Buck Owens, and of course Joe Walsh. There's another story about Joe. But then I get a call from the Fox Theater, and the story is in 1970, this band was going to do a little short tour through the Midwest, and their sound man was on probation, and they weren't supposed to be out of California, the state of California. Well, the FBI and the DEA found out about it, so they went and visited that first show, sat in the last row. And after the band played, they came on to St. Louis. There were no cell phones; they just came on like normal. And Owsley was left with all of his gear in the truck. When he would get it all padlocked together and on the road, he'd come back to St. Louis then. Well, he got it all loaded, but then the FBI and the DEA padlocked him. So the band gets into St. Louis, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, no PA. Where is it? And they found out when they called back to California, he was in jail. Now what do we do? So the stagehand called me and he said, "Hey, you have those big speakers we gave you a few years ago?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Do they work?" I said, "I got them working." He said, "Talk to this guy." He handed the phone to Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. And I told Jerry what I had, and he was like crazy. "Whoa, you have Macintosh amps?" And I went through all of this. "Wow, you get that up here." "Well, I can't be there before about 9 o'clock tonight." "That's okay." So we did, and it was a very historic night. In fact, there was a journalist there that wrote something you can read on the internet. It was his article is named the Night Rock and Roll Sound Was Born. It was February 2nd, 1970. And I didn't know because I wasn't running in these circles, and I really didn't understand what the big hoopla was. I did later. We finished the tour with them, and we were about 6 more dates. And I was just, again, having a lot of fun making big things happen for some of these groups. And the the interesting part of this was you're looking at a guy that has never tasted beer. I've never smoked a cigarette, for gosh sakes, no drugs or anything. But I did have a soldering iron and I could make them sound good. And it really happened quick. We hit the front page of Billboard magazine about that little tour that we saved. And then everybody was calling us. All these superstars in those days, and some still are, they were calling to have me come and do their sound. And I was the first guy, being straight as I was. All these other guys, they'd have a bunch of Volkswagen vans and pickup trucks, and one would bring the lights, and the other band member would bring an amp, and some wouldn't make it, and some did. No, it was a mess. I solved that. At least 40-foot semis. And we took an old Greyhound and we could sleep 11 guys in that thing. So we didn't have a lot of expense of the hotels. It was really kind of the first tour type thing that rock and roll was doing. We did this tour. This was the first date on the first tour of this band. Nobody ever guesses it. It was the little band from Texas. That's ZZ Top without beards. They came later and we're still wonderful friends. I'm still building microphones for them, all of that. But I got another phone call then after he read that front page of the billboard, wanting to know if I could help them. Well, maybe. Uh, what do you need? He says, we need you to be in Boston tomorrow. I said, well, that's not possible. Why? I said, well, we're on tour with Chaka Khan, and I can't drive there. If I could, with our semi, we can't do that in just a half a day. He said, well, you just go out to the airport and rent a Tiger Air Freight. And we did. I got another guy to take the rest of the dates. Off we went to Boston, and it was for The Who. We became dear friends, and we were together for about 6 years. I did all their tours for them, all the sound for it. And the one in Boston was very historic. Also, the first time they had been played in a few years, and had all this big PA. They had never done that before. But Pete Townsend called me after that. We were 2 years on the road with them, and they took a little hiatus. And he said, "You come over here. I want to talk to you." So I go to London. I sat down in his uh, wonderful studio up above his home there on the Thames River. All these synthesizers and tape recorders. He was just an incredible guy with all of the gadgets and stuff. And you probably would recognize this. That's the beginning of his famous song, Baba O'Reilly. It was done in that studio. That red chair he's got his foot up on, that's a little Lowry home organ. That's what he did that entrance with, using that tone generator and a synthesizer. It just went crazy. But we did things that I didn't know anyone else wasn't doing. But we had an artist who would lay out the stage for them, know what we were doing before we hit the. But Pete says, "Hey, quad sounds big right now. 4 channel. Can you make a PA like that we can make Roger's voice go around the room?" I said, "Sure." And so we did. However, there was no mixer. Well, I was working with a sister company in London at that time. We were at the right time. We were building this new mixer, and we got it right before Quadrophenia was going to go out. And we were able to add 2 more output channels, and it was the first ever quad mixer, and we used it on Quadrophenia. That mixer is now in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with a lot of other things. Yeah, that's me with my long hair. I didn't have to do like I did, but I look like I'm a little bit. That's one side of that big PA, and it's Bobby Pridden, their sound man. They gave me a gold record for that. How wonderful! But we were into monitors. And we were the first company to be able to use monitors without feedback. And I leaned on my great ham radio experience and antennas, phasing, how to figure it out. John Entwistle, the bass player, he's standing in front of about about 1,000 watts of amplifier power, no feedback. So it was pretty interesting. Billy Graham's people called me, and we built some monitors for Billy. We also did a lot for the Crystal Cathedral back in the day, and things are just really going crazy. So I sold a music shop and I started a production company where we were building all these wonderful things. My brother in law did the wood shop, we had a fiberglass shop, building all kinds of things. And we had 35 people on that production line and building amplifiers and wonderful things for them. But there again, I didn't realize at the time how forward thinking we were. And those 35 people really made it happen. And a couple of them are still with me, but it was great. But we kept building big and large arena and festival systems, and again, being able to do that, we were called by a lot of these people. We did quite a few of the festivals, and they were. I could be here all night. We'll have to come back some night and give our treatise on festivals because that was something crazy. And we were the only guys that had a system big enough to do it because we had all kinds of things like this happening. Oh, God. But I wrote the book. I really did in 76 because a lot of the guys wanted to do all this, but they didn't know how. Well, I learned it from ham radio and theater organs, learning to listen. Things really went quite good then. One of the tours we did was with the James Gang, one of the first tours they did. And that was back in 68, I think it was. And we met up with this guy, Joe Walsh, WB6ACU. He had a project for me. He had left the uh, the James Gang and he was starting a new band. And he did a recording in Nashville. And but Dottie West and Bill West, they were good friends of him. He was a steel guitar player and so on. They had built a little box, a little 3-inch speaker and a little hose, and they put it in their mouth. And when they played the steel guitar through that little speaker, it kind of sounded like the guitar was singing. Joe said, I used that to do Rocky Mountain Way. Do you think you could help me? Because it's not anywhere close to being able to be used live, because live is pretty wild, as you know. And so Joe and I got together and we did. I put a 250-watt driver in a little fiberglass box we had built, and that was one of 5 prototypes. The one on the right is the current production that's still being built. But I'm sure if you're any kind of music fanatic, that you know this Rocky Mountain Way with that great talk box. And we had made some pretty good inroads with all of the publicity and the things we were doing. And one of the guys that uh, was pulled out of Humble Pie, he came over here. He was only 17, I think, when he came here. He was pulled out and into a solo act. And his manager called me one day and says, "Hey, make him sound good because he's going to be a big star." And I said, "Okay." And that guy was Peter Frampton. Peter and I became really good friends. Actually, we were friends when he was in Humble Pie. But he had married this little gal, Penny. He wrote a song, Penny for Your Thoughts. And one day she called me and she said, hey, send me a Christmas present for Peter. Don't send me a guitar. He's got a lot of guitars. So what did I do? I sent her a talk box. And that's a production line of those talk boxes down in the lower right. Peter was one of the guys he could really make it talk. He could say words. He spent a long time learning how to shape his mouth and do these things. And he made big hits, of course.
Take the
And
wind out yourself, huh?
the talk box
What
was
else?
something very, very special to Peter Frampton, and in all of his interviews, he talks about the Heil talk box, and we've been all these good friends over these years.
Clap your hands, clap your hands.
Lost you.
Hey, Bob, if you can hear us, you're muted.
Yeah, you just muted him.
That better? How about that?
That's better. Thanks, man.
Yeah. We were playing around on moon bounce early on in 62, as you remember. But that led to the TVRO industry. There was one guy, he was the father of the satellite movement for home television. It was Bob Cooper, W5KHT. He was the guy that I would do moon bounce back with the big antenna in 62. And he was holding classes in his backyard in Oklahoma on Saturday once a month. And he would teach us how to build our LNAs using a coffee can, and bingo. Next thing you know, we could pull down something off the satellite like HBO and Showtime and all of those things. Well, I became really into this business. We put in thousands of satellite dishes throughout Southern Illinois, Missouri. It was a fascinating business, all because of ham radio again. That red Thunderbird, that was my everyday car. I was a Thunderbird nut back in those days. I found a dish that would fold up like an umbrella so I could do site checks with it. You had to do site checks because they were 4 gigs, and we had to make sure that you weren't in the path of that. But I also, at the time, I was on KMOX in St. Louis at the big 50 kW clear channel, still out there on the air, CBS. I was on the air for 25 years at night talking about ham radio and gadgets. We called it high tech Heil, all kinds of things. And we were talking about TVRO. We were talking about home theater before it was really a big thing. And also talking about something that was coming. And we talked a lot about this little 2-foot dish. Everybody's going to have one in their backyard. I predicted that. I was right for a number of years. Well, that was in 1991. And I did a lot of test shots with them. In 1994, it was ready to go. And I was on ABC television proclaiming it's here. That was from the Consumer Electronics Show. And away we went. And we put in the very first one. That's the vice president of RCA. And he came out to St. Louis. We put in the first one in a home. That's the new home of Heil Sound in 1994 and still is. At least that front part is. There's thousands of feet behind it now when we got into production of big time stuff. But it was fun. But I got into building sound systems for these people because listening to all that great audio on a 3-inch speaker, I didn't like that. We were building home theaters, actual theaters. I was on the Today Show in 1995. We took one of our theaters up and it was their Christmas pick. But I was doing rooms using really good equipment, phase linear, Macintosh, clip speakers, JBL, all the wonderful things. And building home theaters, real ones, motorized curtains, all that. That's a $300,000 one there, which we sold to a lot of celebrities and sports figures. And Tom Holman, who designed THX, Tomlinson Homing Experiment, at George Lucas's place. That was a great experience of working there and doing things. But all of this really kind of came to a halt. I was doing many, many more things like this. People would come in and say, "You're a home theater guy. What do you do with that?" Well, my nose and my vocabulary. We'll do that. That little curtain pulled back up there. That was that room. And another one. Guy said, "What do you do with that?" Well, we do that. So on and so forth. Well, I finally said, "This is crazy." After 12 years, I'm coming back to radio. I sold all of those businesses. See you later. But what happened to my great Art Collins audio? I was just really ticked. I didn't know. Why? What happened? What happened? And about that time, Paul Klipsch called me. Paul is the father of the home hi-fi, if you recall that, back in the late. He got into it in the late 50s. It was something. He had a lot of experience with Bell Labs, and he built the first true folded horn. But he had a lab down in Hope, Arkansas. Used to be an old telephone exchange. Well, Paul called me. He wanted to come and see the guy that had that 10,000 watt PA. And so he did. He flew his plane up to me. And that day it was crazy. All day long, he's about this tall over me. Why'd you do that? Well, how come you did this? Where'd you learn that? And everything centered around ham radio, of course. He took me down to his home that night, flew down in his little Bonanza. And the next day, oh my goodness, I learned so much. And I want you to really pay attention here, because these are things that we need to know, but they're not in the handbooks. He guided me to this stuff. I had to go to the library. You can go to DuckDuckGo or Google and find these easily. But here are some of the things that you really need to know about, because he guided me to the studies of Bell Labs, which he referred to as the idea factory of the 1920s. Bell Labs was the consolidation of AT&T and Western Electric, which was the manufacturing arm of the Bell system. There were 4,000 scientists and engineers assigned to the newly created Bell Telephone Labs, and they were researching how our ears worked and what frequencies were most important to understand the spoken word. Why were they doing that? Well, they were doing that because they put the telephone system together. They started out in New Jersey, 2 wires, across the country, all the way to the West Coast. And every 50 miles was a relay station. Wow. To keep the frequency up, to keep the level up, to keep everything linear all across the country. Well, when they finally got it all working, this is what they heard.
Hello. Hello. Oh my. What is going on here? They couldn't figure it out because it wasn't linear. It wasn't articulate. And it was very mushy and mundane. What happened? So they put those 4,000 scientists on the case. What was the case?
The case was that our ears needed to have certain frequencies, not just flat like you just heard it, to determine what the spoken word was. Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson of that team took it on, and this is one of their equal loudness curves of the human ear, and we all hear similar. Nobody is going to escape this. And you'll notice the louder it gets, the flatter it gets. That's another situation. That's why kids like to listen to music real loud, because they get it up over 100 dB. It's great. They can hear everything pretty flat. But down in the lower, But then they came up with the spectacle of all spectacles of audio engineering. They figured out what frequencies our human ears, all of us, need to understand the spoken word. And those frequencies are between 2 and 3K, 2.5 being the sweet spot. Here goes, as you can take a listen. Here we are, pretty flat, just normal as you'd listen to things. I am going to turn one knob, one and one only. This is a parametric EQ, meaning I can change the parameters. It's not just a set frequency like bass and treble, which we'll get into in a minute. But you can change the parameters. And I'm going to take this knob and turn it from flat, and I'm going to increase 2.5. And when I do, you will hear the sweet spot. It just happens. I didn't do anything else. And now you can understand the F and an S and a P and a B very easily. If I take it back to flat, the F and the S and the P and the B, they're not articulate. So you have a difficult time of understanding them. I'll do it again. There it is flat. Now I'm going to increase. I'm just turning it up. There it is, about 1,000 cycles. There's 1,500. And the minute I hit 2.5K, you just know it's perfect. The S's, the F's, it's all there. But without the proper equalization, nope, doesn't happen. Everything we own is equalized. I know you're going to do, oh, I don't need that EQ. We do. All of us do. Everything you have, your telephone, car radio, cell phone, you just name it. It might not have bass and treble, might not have a control, but the engineers have pre-equalized it for you. So I got to thinking, I'm back into radio and I don't like it. What am I going to do to fix it? So I did. I built the first equalizer that came to ham radio, 1982. It was called the EQ 200. And I just love playing with all that stuff. And I'd get on the air with it and everybody, what are you talking on? Wow. Well, the situation was I wrote an article for QST and it became really popular very fast. And it was all about this little box. Thousands of them were built and sold. A lot of kits were sold, people putting it together. And you could do some wonderful things by increasing that 2.5K. Because what I did, there are two filters in this thing. This filter is sitting at 2.5K. The only thing you can do is boost or cut it, but that's okay. And then the next one is sitting at 160 hertz. You can roll off that low end, get rid of that bass. You heard it a minute ago. It does no good. But now, if you balance those up like it is now, things are pretty good. But you still have to have that punchy 2.5K. And so we were very, very happy about all of that, so we could roll all these things off and make things happen. But there's a lot more to what happens with our ham radios. The equalization is very important. But at the time, we didn't have any except my EQ 200. And the proper mic gain, that's very, very easy. You watch your ALC meter. That's really should be renamed mic gain. And the Yaesu 9000 has that. I designed the front end and the equalizer for Dr. Hasegawa, and I got my way. It doesn't have an ALC meter. Well, it has a meter, but it's called mic gain. That's how you set your mic gain. You never want to see it over in the red. Just a little peak once in a while. The bandwidth, you can change the bandwidths and have different bandwidths for different frequencies, whether you want to be sharp, you want to be mellow. No compression. I don't use very much compression. And then you have to get into the equalization. Well, in 1999, I got a letter from Dr. Inouye of ICOM, and he had a picture of his station. He had my equalizer and one of my Goldline microphones. I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking of new radio, and I want to put your EQ in. And he just came to me to make sure that I agreed with all the frequencies. And if you own an ICOM, you have one of these in your ICOM. All ICOMs have my EQ 200 in them, even up until this old guy. I just got this, by the way, not very long ago because they're wanting me to build a headset for it. It's got a very strange mic input, and so we're going to be able to use the headsets. This, my friends, is a 7300 in a little box that you can hold in the palm of your hands. Plus, it has D-Star and Bluetooth. It runs from a battery, 5 watts. Oh my gosh, is this thing cool or what? I mean, it's got all the goodies in it. I mean, it does all the things just like the big rigs. But anyway, you can probably tell I get pretty fascinated with this hobby. But anyway, that changed amateur radio. This little crazy box. Then a year later, Dr. Hasagawa of Yaesu came to me at Dayton and said, I want to do it better. And so we designed a parametric EQ for him. I said, you're going to have trouble though. What be the trouble? Education. What do you mean? Well, we're going to really get into this in a few minutes. I mean, seriously, because so many people own a Yaesu and they don't understand the parametric. Why? Here, what do you have? You have 2 knobs, bass, treble, plus, minus, right? A Yaesu has, you ready for this? 9 controls. 9. So most people go, forget it. Joe said I sound just fine. Well, no, you don't. You can sound better. We're going to teach you how. One of the things that we want to talk about also is a microphone. It is so important to know how to address a microphone. What are you talking about, Heil? Addressing a microphone is very important. First of all, you never want to be more than 2 inches from a microphone, ever. Because a lot of guys will get a desk stand and they don't get into it, so they sit back. Listen to what happens. Every time you double the distance, you lose 6 decibel. Think about that, everybody. You double your power, that's 3 dB. Well, you're going to take away 6 dB just by not addressing the mic right. Here we go. I'm going to put it down here. Here we go. Where you normally have it. It lost everything. Well, shut up, Heil. You just crank up that gain. Yeah, well, when I do, sounds like I'm in a gymnasium. So you don't want to do that. You have to do it acoustically. And when you bring it back to your mouth, everything came back. Transient response, all of your wonderful articulation you had, dynamic range, it's all there. So you never want to be more than about 2 inches. That's why I brought booms to this market. And the reason I did that was I need it for myself because I'm always building stuff, soldering iron on one hand. And I did that in 1981, I think it was. And just, I love sharing this stuff with you guys. It just makes me so thrilled that I can help you. But no more arm's length, okay? That does not work. And I don't care what Joe or Bill or Bob or whoever tells you, it's the science of it. And so you can make it sound good. The other thing you want to do is make sure you use one of these guys. They come with all of our microphones, but they're not all created equal. Why do you have it? You have that for plosives. What are you talking about? When a guy speaks or a girl speaks, we exit air and P-pops, pop, pop, poop, poop. You can hear those. They pop and they should not pop. But when you speak into it straight on, you're moving the diaphragm down, hits into the voice coil, causes that pop. You don't want that. You cure it with this, but it has to be the right one. Not all foam windscreens are created equal. This one is acoustically transparent. I hear guys on the air, hey, take that stupid muff off. You're all muffled. If that's true, it's not right. Throw it away. Probably bought it at Walmart. No, 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 no. This is a real scientific piece of acoustic foam. It does not injure the audio. It's acoustically transparent, as you just heard. Put it back on there, nothing happens. But if I don't, but I don't have those plosives. So if you have a lot, sometimes people really don't, but it's something that you really want to think about and make it happen. Well, I knew all this was going on with equalization, so I decided it was time for me to build microphone elements like that. And so I did. I built the famous HC4 and HC5. And look at the chart. I roll them off. So you don't have to equalize a whole lot with our microphones because we do it for you. You see the big wide one, that's the full range, the gold line. That's what I'm talking into is a PR22, but it's that type of frequency response. But it's got to rise at 2.5. And then we get into the others and man, it rolls it off hard. That's what we use in our headsets. But we're building large dynamic mics. Nobody's ever done that. Condensers are a joke. They need to leave the country. Really, because they're too sensitive. They pick up the whole room. Horrible rear rejection. Well, we took care of that, as you're going to learn in a minute. We have a custom shop. We do all kinds of really neat things. We also have some very, very nice microphones, around $100. This is the HM12. Wow, is it work? Then the 781. The 781 is the darling of the podcasters, and we have a lot of ham radio with you with the PR 781. It's kind of my pick for ham radio, actually, because you don't have to roll off that low end. I really built that, the PR 40, for studios. I never intended for it to come to ham radio, but it did in a big way. But it has to be balanced and it be proper. The reason I built it was because of Joe Walsh. Joe and I are dear friends. In 2006, Sarah and I had a home for a short time in California working in the studios and stuff with Joe and other people. He sat me down in his kitchen one day and said, you need to build me a better microphone. Why? Well, for my recording and maybe on the stage, I get tired of holding it right here in my mouth. You know, you've seen entertainers, they can't move off the side because of the pattern. Well, I design patterns that I can be all over it, 180 degrees, and it doesn't change. How did I do that? Wow. We can rotate that a full 180, so you don't have to be stuck right in the front. Then Joe says, I don't want to hear the guys behind me, so get rid of them. So here's what I did. Our custom shop had a lot to do with, ooh, I better be careful here. This thing has a lot of output. PR 40. What I did for Joe is I built this microphone that has 40 dB of rear rejection. 40. No other microphone on the planet will do this. I didn't know it at the time. I knew it was going to be good, but not that good. And so how we did it was all about ham radio. And here's the reason. First of all, I'll let you see what we did. It's a large diaphragm. We were the first company and the only to really build a large diaphragm instead of the little 3/4 or inch that Electro Voice and Shure and all those guys are using. I figured it out. But then they all have little holes, little bitty 1/8 inch holes at 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock. That's the entrance for the rear information, which is going to be out of phase, really. So I figured the way to get a lot of it is open the whole bottom of that element, which I did. Put it on what I call a signal collection tube. So all the different frequencies come rolling up from the bottom and the back up through the screens into this signal collection tube. Is just a thing to mount the element. Now we have a microphone that was never thought of before because it was a dream. Not anymore. This microphone has 40 dB. When I turn this backwards, you won't hear me, or it'll be 40 down. Here we go. Oh, it's still on, and I'm still talking. Yeah, but it's 40 dB down. I'm not playing games with you. This is really a fabulous microphone. And now, gosh, there are so many studios. Sirius Radio just bought 250 of them, recording studios. And yeah, a lot of ham radio guys are using it too. But that's okay. That's okay. We're cool with that. You just have to learn to balance it. Balance is everything. And some of our other elements are in our headsets, and we become the #1 headset in the country. The new one is the little BM10. That's wonderful for lightweight. It comes in a single or a dual. But I listen to you guys and gals. But how did I get this microphone to work? What are you talking about? The phasing? What does that mean? Well, phasing is an incredible thing. And very few people know how it works because nobody takes the time to tell you or show you. What I've done here is brought a couple of things with me, and I don't think you'll ever forget the next 5 minutes. I'm going to unplug this. Now, I don't pull games with this, by the way. This is the real deal. There's #1. There's #2. What I did is I built a Y chord. No games being played. So I can have 2 microphones at one time. And they're both in phase. They're both the same PR22s. Yeah, they're different colors. But I have this little guy. It's backwards. Pin 2 is to 3 and 3 is to 2. Really? Does it still work? Well, let's find out. It works great. What's the big deal, Heil? Well, when I talk in this one, the element, the driver, the diaphragm goes down. My voice and air moves it down through the voice coil. This one's out of phase. This one comes up. So now we have 2 out of phase. What is the big deal? I just want to know, why are you doing this? I wish we had an hour. I could be here all hour or more talking about my favorite subject. You ready? When you hear both of these, they're out of phase. They both work just fine, but together, no, nothing. No, I'm screaming. They're out of phase. They don't work. Now, let's really get into it. How does your noise limiter work? How does your, remember when the guy comes next to you and you hit that little notch filter? You get rid of that guy. It puts him out of phase. He's gone. There are so many things, everybody, so many things. How did Dr. Yagi build the Yagi antenna? How did he do that? He didn't have computers. He did not have computers. How did he do it? Well, he figured out mathematically that he could build a Yagi. At that time it wasn't called a Yagi, but he could build a microphone, an antenna make the director a little shorter and so far out, then he builds a reflector. A little longer, so far back, he could get rejection and he could get gain, all because of phasing. I have always been just fascinated with guys who would talk about phased arrays. And oh gosh, I don't have enough money for this one. Well, I discovered that I was quite wrong. And I have an incredible couple of minutes for you. Back in 2008, Sarah and I bought a second property down in the Ozarks of 5.5 acres. Her mother lived down near Springfield, Missouri at the time. And I was able to put up a phased array. Went out and got a couple of telephone poles. Electric company gave them to me, by the way. They throw away a lot of poles that aren't just right. Here comes an incredible thing. And it cost me all of maybe $12. And I think you will enjoy what you're about to experience. Just completed the installation of a 75-meter phased array antenna system, consisting of a pair of coaxial dipoles mounted atop a pair of 55-foot telephone poles. We put them in an inverted V fashion, and the poles are 64 foot apart. These are 500 foot from the operating position, fed with RG213. In order to make the antennas directly from east to west, we use a delay line, a 43 foot here on 75 meters that's switched in and out of the driven element, either east or west. The downlead length is 126 foot. We take all of that coax, the downlead length, the 43 foot phasing delay line, and mounted them in a container, one of the plastic container boxes that we actually buried, and just the top of it shows. It's all sealed, so it's waterproof. But that's the way we get to switch all the components from 500 foot using one of the Amatron RCS 8V remote switches. It really works well. Take a listen to how we can get at least 10 to 20 dB difference east to west.
Like a lot of people do. Mine's usually 3 inches or so. That's just after I get done mowing it. And I know, probably, we get a dry day. I'm gonna have to lay out there and mow. That's just all there is to it, because if you leave it that high, when it starts growing in it all, it gets looking ragged pretty quick. So it's to that point now, and
the system really performs on weak signals. Take a listen as we switch to the direction they're coming from. Also note the preamplifier makes no difference on 75 meters on this signal. The preamp will, of course, make the meter read higher, but in many cases, the preamplifier does not cause the weak signal to be more readable. Check it out.
Hey, Sue. Yeah, well, I see they introduced big display on it, and I don't know if that is their form of portable, or what that is. Your wire, having that hooked up to your computer, and then did you use your handheld to go through it?
I don't think I have to say anymore. What an incredible thing. And it's something that is real easy to do. The only thing I did special, I used Ameritron's relays, but I don't like these things. I don't like rotary switches. And so what I did is I went to Antique Electric Supply in Mesa, Arizona, and bought some Les Paul guitar switches. And I could switch to east to west for 40 meters and east to west for 75. I also had 160 that I could switch another little switch, but that's how I switched east to west. Then I have another group of those, the colored ones you see down there, switches that switch all of my different transceivers. Really great stuff. But there again, we are doing things that need to be talked about, because you can do this. and you can do it really easy. And I want you to learn how to use your microphone, learn how to set up your DSP and your equalization. It is really easy. The two band shelving that all the ICOMs have, from the Pro 1 through the little guy here, 7300 of them. Just set the bass to -1. Get rid of some low end, maybe -2, and the treble to +5. That's for your DX work. You are really aggressive there at -1 and +5. Very aggressive. You're not going to sound really beautiful, but you're going to be really, really cool to cut through the pileups. Then the rag chew side, you don't be so aggressive. You go down only about 2 or 3 dB on the bass and +3 on the treble. And with the IC element, you have to use electrodes with all ICOMs because they have low gain preamps. You set the mic gain at about 8 o'clock on most of these things. 3 o'clock for dynamic elements because they don't have any gain with them as far as voltage out. Watch the ALC meter. That's how you set mic gain. And you can set the compression if you want. I'm one that I'm not a compression nut. But when you go into the radio, it's pretty simple. There's the 7300, 7610, this little 705. Just move that down to -2 +3, and you're there. But there again, you have to use one of our microphones or a microphone with an element in it that's an electret. I was commissioned by ICOM to build this. This is a wonderful match to all ICOMs, and it's not very expensive. What are we going to do about the parametric? And if there's not one thing I do tonight, this is what I really feel good about. If you're a Yaesu new user, here's why. We have, as I told you a while ago, 2 controls, plus or minus of those 2 controls with ICOM and with my EQ200 with it. What do you do with parametric? You are the engineer. You can change the parameters. And you have 9 controls. What are they? Why is it? Very simple. If I bring in a 10-year-old child right here, I could teach him in about 3 minutes. I'm going to teach you. Here it is. It's real simple. First of all, we have 3 filters. That's 9 controls, right? They each have 3 things you can mess with. Here's what you do. We're going to take that first filter. We're going to set the frequency because you can do that. It's a parametric. You can change the parameter. Set the frequency at 200. Now what are you going to do with it? I want to notch that low end. So -3 dB. And then the bandwidth. Usually you can set that at it's 1, 2, or 3. And what that does is it allows that 200 to maybe be down a little further or narrow. So I leave it at 2. 2 octave is what it really is. So it could be up to 400 or it could be down into under 100. So just leave it at 2. Don't worry about it ever. Second filter, where you put that. There's something strange about some audio. It all has boxy sound at around 900 to 1200. It's a boxy sound. So go to 900 or 1000, set the frequency. You're going to notch it maybe about 3 dB, 2 octaves. Now the third filter, you're going to be ahead of me. Where are you going to put it? 2.5K, going to crank it like crazy, plus 8 dB or wherever. You have to listen. Again, listening is so important. As you go through these, headphones and another receiver is the best way. But here's a little, I took this picture off the screen and it'll help you. You have all these parametric functions, but it's all the same. There's 3 things: frequency, level, width, frequency, level, width, frequency, level, width. Very simple. And anybody can get into setting their parametric EQ. So, you know, we want to pay attention to that. And the other thing I want to leave you with tonight is one of my favorite things. We talked about bandwidth and we talked about equalization and how important, remember, how important those 4,000 scientists discovered about our ears and what we really need to hear. Well, here is the primo demonstration. You think about the air in this little balloon being RF, okay? And we're going to set the limits 100 on the low end and let's say 3,000 on the top end, okay? Great. Now, if you roll that low end off hard and you roll it in the top, like the contesters like to do it, and you probably say, that sounds crazy. Yeah, but look where all their power goes when they shorten the bandwidth. It's all up at 2.5K. They're not wasting it down here in the low end. They don't care about that. They want to make themselves big and loud. So they're going to roll off that low end. And what happens there? 2.5K goes crazy. Think about that. If you're a DXer, you already know it. Oh, when I brought the HC4 out, I got blistered. Why would you have such a stupid sounding? Yeah, it's the worst microphone element ever. And I designed it. Why? Working with some really top drawer contest and DXers. That's what they want. They want all of their power to be at 2.5K. How do they do that? Bandwidth and equalization. It's very simple. And you can do some beautiful things. But again, you have to be able to listen to yourself and understand what's going on. But those are all simple things. And it's why we build things for the Contest DX crowd. And one of the best things we've done in the past 10 years has been this little guy, the Pro 7. It is the king for DXers and contesters, as well as everybody else, because we have different elements for it. We have an ICOM element, and then we have a DX element in a full range. But this thing is loaded. Check it out. First of all, I've always wanted to do this since I met up with Paul Klipsch. I didn't have the room. I do here. The speaker sits way back here. It's that far from your ears. Take your hands and do something for me. Put them up against your head. What happens to your audio? It sounds crazy. Squeeze it really hard. That's what happens when you put the speaker right up to your ear, and it'll feed back if you have any kind of hearing aid. So you're really in big trouble. Well, that doesn't happen here. This thing has been a blessing to people with hearing aids because they don't have that feedback. Very, very comfortable. I mean, the pads on these things are beautiful. And I read EHAM every day just to make sure. If anybody complains about my stuff, I will try to contact them and help them because something's wrong. I use this stuff every day. I design it. I know what it's doing. Every one of my headsets has a steel band up here. And you can, if you have a wide head, don't be afraid. You're not going to bend it and break it. You'll bend it to your shape. If you have a pinhead like me, fine. You can adjust our headsets. Do that so they're comfortable all the time. This one is very special. It has a balance control. So if you are hard of hearing one side or the other, you can take care of that. And then I put another little jack in the side of this. What is that for? That is for a monitor. So if you're an operator and you have a logger, you don't need a bunch of Y cords. Plug him in here. And last but not least, it's the only headset that has phase reversal. What in the world is that for? It's a miracle button. And if you ever talk to some of the Kingpin DXers, or if you are one and own that, you will agree with me. It's their secret weapon. Between my elements that are in that I showed you the way that thing takes your audio and puts it where I need it. Well, if you're listening to a pile up and you hear a little wheaky back here, reverse the phase and the wheaky comes up here. You can move signals around in your head acoustically. It's really a neat thing. And again, so many guys that are using our Pro 7s love the fact that it sounds so good. And it's the latest tool in the arsenal of serious operators and works wonderful. So you find all these operators out there, and you'll discover that they're using our stuff because I built this stuff for them, and most of them were my design engineers. I'm very proud of that. I get some great ideas from some of these guys and gals. But I had one other little thing that we need to talk about. If we had another half hour, I'd get into other things it could be, but we're going to go into something that nobody talks about. We all tailor our transmitter, worried about what it sounds like. And does Bill say I sound good? What about your receiver? Huh? You do all of this stuff, but you don't do anything about the receiver. Well, I think it's time to think about that receiver. And so I did. I built the first parametric audio system for receiving. This is a miracle box, and I do mean that, called the Parametric Receive System. You come out of the product detector, one of the DIN plugs in the back, or you can come out of the headphone amp. You just have to run the gain down real low because, listen up, I work for these companies. I'm inside these companies, and I know every single solitary transceiver, $15,000 to $400, has 1, maybe 2 watts for the big boys, but they have 10% distortion. They drive me crazy. I just can't stand distortion, and there's no need for it. But they won't do anything about it. I've talked to them. No, our receiver's fine. They're talking about sensitivity, selectivity. The only thing you ever hear about, listen on the bands. You never hear anybody talk about how poor the audio is. Oh, it sounds great. They got a 3-inch little junky speaker. Well, yeah, but I got the matching speaker. Yeah, let me tell you about that matching speaker. It's that same stupid little speaker in a $100 box that you pay $2.50 for. Trust me, I'm in there. I know what they're doing, and it ticks me off. So I said, we're going to do something. And man, did we do it. First of all, I built the speaker. It's 25 watts at 0.1. That's hi-fi level, 25 watts. And it has balanced line in, which is really wonderful for distortion or anything else, or RFI. But then we've got a little 3-inch tweeter, and it's in a tuned cavity, just like Paul Klipsch taught me to build those hundreds of boxes when we were doing all of the arena systems. Same thing. You tune the cavity to the speaker. What about the rest of it? I have a great demonstration here. I recorded off air a couple of signals. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the old camera up for you so you can see it. There's the little box. I call it a miracle box, and it really is. First of all, it has 3 filters. High filter at 6K. Low filter, 160 hertz. You can notch it, you can boost it. Then the middle is parametric. You are the engineer. You can change the parameters of this from 400 cycles up to 4,000 cycles. This is the gain control. So I'm going to set the gain control about 3 o'clock. And we're going to listen to some people. And these people, as I said, I took them off air during conversation. Mid-range.
Of the 2 meter, a sideband, but they're just not. It's not the same.
That's the way you hear him.
Just for 2 meter sideband. The receivers will never.
There's the way you hear him. It's flat.
So it's kind of nice that, again, ICOM technology. These were nice
There's
enough in my
another
county, which was the worst, by the way.
The way you hear it.
Area. They gave me 5 years seniority, but I was basically starting at the bottom. So many times people who spend 10, 20 years in the Navy or whatever the military is and retire, people say, well, you got it made. No.
The next one is a D104, which is all highs. And I guess okay for certain things, but it's not highs in the right place. So what we're going to do, put the low in.
And sure enough, I can copy it. I had a lot of fun the other night. I thought, well, I wonder if I can copy that.
There's the way you hear him.
At about 30 words a minute, and so I speeded up the tape, and sure enough, I can copy it.
Now comes the good stuff. It's the way you hear him.
Echo India 8 Bravo.
There it is, flat.
BI-ATLB calling in by 4 Sierra Germany. Hope I have it right. Very good day to you from Ireland. Name is Liam, running India Alpha Mike, over.
There's just no question. And this has 2 separate, very low distortion headphone amplifiers. So you can have a logger and an operator, or we've had a number of guys really almost crying when they call me and tell me it gave their radio back. They're hard of hearing in one side or the other. So you plug the left side of your headphone here and the right side here, and you can balance those 2 amplifiers. The record out is really cool. That's how I made those recordings. Tuned in 20 meters one day, and there it was. Run a cord from here to your computer, maybe Audacity, one of the programs, and you can record. No problem. So I don't think I have to say much to you. It really is a miracle box. And nobody's done anything like it. They got some copy things. But again, these are people that they really don't pay a lot of attention to audio. And I have been so blessed to be touched by the great Paul Klipsch and a lot of the Bell Lab studies and all that. I want you to do that. Go look up some of those wonderful findings of the Bell Labs. They did some gracious things in their day, and now we can live with them, but we don't hear about it. At least I don't. You read handbooks today, what you got? Little to nothing, let me tell you. And it's really kind of sad. One of the other things that I did in closing is I just get sick and tired of manufacturers and their junky little matching microphones. None of them build their own microphones. They're done by an OEM company. But what's really terrible about them is the cable they use and the connectors they use. The reason is that Foster is the company that invented this cable connector. You recognize it. Every one of your microphones have that little thing on it. Little bitty 1/4-inch ring. You can hardly get into it, especially if you got a recess like a TS-2000 or something. And here's what really ticks me off. They don't use very good wire, and they use a piece of heat shrink to make up the space for their cable clamp. Well, I did something much better. I went to Foster, and they allowed me to use their patent, and we built our stealth mic connector, I call it. It is really cool. It's got about a 1/2 inch ring, but the cable clamp, there's two of them. There's a small one for the push to talk line that we do in our cables, but the cable itself, we make our own cable. It's very, very flexible and it matches that cable clamp. When you clamp that down, you could pull your car with that. It will not come out of there. And I make our own wire because every single solitary piece of wire and ham radio is 24, 26 gauge. And if you ever try to spread the and it's usually copper braid, you get about 2 little strands. It's crazy. That's 18 gauge wire, 2 of them, because we do balanced line. Gets rid of a lot of RFI. Plus, a ton of broadcasters love our cable because of that, because they run other signals like we do. The blue and the red are push to talk lines carrying DC. In the cable you have, they do all that inside. So the DC and the AC are all together. RFI City. It's really terrible. But there again, I can't be the only guy, but I guess we are in some realm. It's just all the playing around I've done in 65 years as a ham. And it all come home to me recently. We are the only manufacturer in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's that Mavis console we built for the Quadrophenia tours, and our own power amps we built. That's one of the monitor speakers, stuff like that. The other side has more things to it. And shortly after that, I was awarded an honorary PhD degree from Missouri University for music and electronics. I hardly made it through high school, but like the chancellor said that night when I gave the speech, he said, yeah, but it took you 50 years to do this. So I'm still learning. I still learn from each of you. And I had 2 guys today call me. I get all kinds of phone calls and I love them because they had a couple of special things with a transmitter and I'd never run across that. And by golly, we put our heads together and figured it out. I love it. Send me an email. This K9EID at ARRL or bob@heilsound.com. Don't be shy. Anything you have at all that I might be able to help or guide you somewhere, that I'm there for you. Would we have any questions? Surely somebody's got some questions. Don't be shy. Let's hear what you got to say.
This is Norm Burrist, and I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear me?
Sure can.
What is the proper pin for hot? Is it 2 or 3 on a microphone cable?
Well, you follow the commercial stuff, and pin 2 is hot. However, if you go to Europe, pin 2
It's
is
3.
Huh?
It's the opposite.
That's right.
Yeah.
You have to be careful, but all of America is pin 2 is hot.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Are you playing with the
I was a video engineer, hooking up tape decks and recording machines, and
Sure.
it seems like everybody's got a different pin out. East Coast to West Coast to Europe.
Stupid, isn't it?
Yeah. And then the interface between audio between computers and audio systems, there's about an 8 dB difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because computers never did figure it out.
I working for those companies as I did. I worked for all of them, Kenwood, Yaesu, and ICOM. I never could get them, except I got my way one time with Yaesu. You go look at a FT 9000. That was the first one that Dr. Hasegawa turned me loose with. And boy, did he turn me loose. I got in the way. You're going to love this if you don't know this. The input connector is a 3-pin XLR panel mounted, so that when you go to use it, this is the microphone you used, okay? Balance line. Got rid of a lot of RF when we did it, RF interference. The other thing I got with my pushing them hard, there is no ALC meter, none. There's a meter, but it's marked mic gain, as all them should be. That's how you set microphone gain. But you try to tell these manufacturers, because what good is ALC really? What is it? But think about what good it is if you're thinking in the mic gain really works. And I was really happy with all of that. And then, of course, my parametric EQ. And I was really blessed over that one because it turned a lot of heavy duty users into some interesting stuff, especially the balance line. Well, that's great. You and I could probably talk all night.
Sure. I got
Somebody-
involved with a few bands where we hooked up the video for doing the big screens where they'd hook up many monitors together.
Sure.
I did some of the work on the recording machines for that
Yeah.
playback. It was
Some of that
fun.
Some of that was a nightmare,
Yes, it was.
but you just had to get people like you to do it right. And
Yep.
you know who those people were? Hams. I loved it.
That's-
I'd go into these big arenas and we'd do all this stuff. Like Carrie Underwood has 16 semis and 9 buses. I mean, it's incredible. But we'll get these guys coming in, the house audio guys. Well, and what college did you go to? What kind of degree you got? I don't have one. You don't have a degree. Where'd you learn this ham radio? No, I mean, like, where did you learn this? I'm going, ham radio. Now, look, I'm asking you, where'd you learn it? I said, no, you don't understand. I learned it all from amateur radio. Look it up. And I'd walk away. And it's true. Gosh. Yeah, fun stuff. Anybody else? You got to have some questions, good or bad.
I've got a question. Well, yeah, I do have a question for you, Bob. First of all, it's an honor to talk to you. This is Clint, W7CBL, and I teach a high school Linux class. As part of the Linux class, I found one of the best ways to teach kids about networking and certain principles with computing is ham radio.
Yeah.
So as part of this, our Linux class, they learn their technician license. And I'm going to show them this in class later this week. And I wondered if you could give my students some advice as they're aspiring hams and getting ready for their tests.
Yeah, I get this a lot. The best thing you can do, get a general license at least. Yeah, it's fun to walk around with a handy-talkie. But if you really want to get into this, you want to get on some lower frequencies where you can play with antennas. Some of the stuff you saw tonight. Audio, you're not going to do much with a handy-talkie. Not even going to do much with repeaters. So, yeah, that's all fun. Do not take me wrong on this. We need those. But you asked me a question about where can you learn things better? It's going to be on the lower frequencies so you can play with antennas. Look what I did with phasing. My goodness, just amazing what you can do with antennas and phasing. And then, like a lot of people will come to me and say, how would you get into it? What would you do first? Well, you get on 40 meters. It's my go-to band for newcomers. Why? It's usually open 24/7. And the antenna is really simple. I'll go into places where I'm teaching the class and we'll make a 40-meter dipole, 33 foot, right? Aside, right? 33 foot. Take a piece of coax, make your little center insulator. Don't even do that. Just solder it together. Shield goes that way and plus goes that way. Plug it into your rig. One I did here recently, I had a 730, very old Icom, but works great. And the first call we made, I forgot to tell you this. We went out and hung it up in a cherry tree. It was only up about 10 or 20 feet, 10 or 15 feet. We could hardly reach it, okay? We worked London, England. The whole class turns upside down. But that's the kind of thing you can do. It's not Bob Heil. It's nothing outside of what anybody else could do. And those are just little things that they will never forget. And that's what you have to do with teaching students. And anytime you want, call me. We'll come into the class and talk about stuff.
Oh, that's by the way, that's absolutely true. You send Bob an email, and he'll make a date with you.
Yep.
Anybody else have anything they would like to talk about, add, or comment on? I've had a couple of people tell me we need to buy a couple of more headsets, Bob.
I can help you with that.
Yeah, I think we will. We're using the Heil headsets over in our emergency operations center, but they're probably old enough now that we could justify buying some new Heil 7s. Those are pretty nice headsets.
Send me an email.
Okay.
Hi, Roland. Hi, Bob. Blake out here. Hi, Bob. I've heard about you for decades. Oh, wow.
Do I owe
That's
you
nice?
Do I owe you money or something?
No, not that I know of. Unless you got something up your sleeve. No, I got a kick out of hearing about all the old times, good old days. Thank you for what you did. I'm a big 2-meter sideband nut, and I saw that phased array. Holy crud, I haven't seen anything like that before. That was beautiful. I've got a 10 element Cushcraft right now, and I'm wanting to excuse me, stack another 10 element above it, but I'm seeing so many different spacings from top to bottom for horizontal. What do I want to go with? And where I live, I got a big problem with wind, so I can't get too spacey with it. Go ahead.
Well, these are 10 element Cushcrafts?
Yes, they are.
Well, they make a really nice phasing harness for that. I have a pair of those here. They make a phasing harness for that, and it really works nice. And you don't have to worry about building a lot of stuff there. They've done it for you. But you might want to check on the phasing harness they have. It works well.
Yeah, I got the, I think it was Cushcraft. They call it the PD2 power divider.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got one of those. I haven't put everything together. It's still winter time.
That's the
But
guy.
Yep. The spacing in feet or whatever you call it between top to bottom of them being horizontal, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because I've read so many different high to low, vertical, well, stacking one above the other, but horizontal direction for 2-meter sideband of what the spacing would be high to low, or of one above the other.
Yeah, the spacing there again, Cushcraft's they have a whole paper on that. You need to contact them because they will give you the details of how it was designed. That's the kicker, and it'll work well. It'll work really well.
Yeah. Well, back in the late 90s when I got into ham radio, I was always a sideband nut back in the CB days before I got in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always talking 200-300 miles, with just 150 watts off a single. But I want to surprise some people down south of me 200-300 miles away.
Yeah.
With stacking a couple.
Your answer, if I were you, go back and drop a line to Cushcraft and tell them what you want to do. And they have all the parameters of how those were designed. That's the kicker. And that's what I would do.
Yeah. I've seen a lot about that.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't think of what it's called. The dB width in degrees or whatever, and how you calculate this and calculate that. And it's like, really? Just tell me in English.
Right. That's what I said. You need You need to just call them and they will tell you exactly how it was designed. See, that's the key. You're not trying to do anything crazy. You just want the way those antennas were designed to be stacked, and they can help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm not trying to talk to Pluto yet, but anyway. Okay. Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Have fun.
Okay. Thanks, Blake. Anybody else have anything they would like to bring up tonight? Well, Bob, thank you. You know, truly, this has been a delight, and I appreciate it.
Well, I get crazy because I probably go way too long, but there's some of the stuff in the front. A lot of guys like to know some of the history of where I came from.
Yes.
And
very much so.
Yeah,
well,
I like to do some of that.
Love that history, sir.
You come back, invite me back sometime, and we'll pick a subject and spend the hour on it. We can do
okay,
that.
we will do that. Thank you so very. Thank you, sir.
I thank you. Everybody be good and stay safe and stay in touch with me. We're always out there doing stuff. I look forward to coming back and we'll dive into a subject. Thank you so much for being here. We'll
Okay.
talk later.
73. Thank you all. Have a great evening.